Thank you very much for showing up here. Thank you for your time. I have a few questions to ask you regarding nuclear terror. First, to start off, how do you feel about current nuclear threats?
So I feel like the largest nuclear threat, which had been kind of in the news for a few months there of North Korea, is really not as much to worry about now because of the recent headlines, I think, today, where they're actually meeting with South Korea for the first time in who knows how many years. I think it's Kim Jong Un's first time meeting with a South Korean leader in his entire reign. So I think that's definitely looking up for that threat. I think that threat's kind of being pacified, not as large as it definitely was with the rhetoric between him and Trump earlier in the year at the end of 2017, early 2018. However, there are still many other nuclear threats, I believe, that aren't really reported on a day to day basis. Russia definitely has a lot of nuclear weapons capabilities, and, they're with their offensive maneuvers in Ukraine over the past few years and all that fun stuff. It's not really something we should be worried about on a day to day basis, but I think it's something we definitely need to consider and to think about just to make sure we're prepared, we're ready for anything to happen. Uh, yeah, but besides from that, I feel like there's not a lot of great nuclear threats in the world, especially with the U.S. having the arsenal they do and the ability to retaliate. I feel like it really discourages other countries from becoming nuclear threats to us in particular.
That's fair. How do you think we could like prevent nuclear terror?
So I think the biggest thing about preventing nuclear terror, first of all, I think non-proliferation is the way to go. I think, as we saw at the end of World War II, nuclear weapons are not great for really anyone. The people who use them, the environment, the people who they're used on. I feel like it's just not a good form of war in any way. This in any sense of the word war. And I feel like if we ever get into a nuclear war with somebody, that might be one of the ways the human race ends, which is obviously never a good thing. So I think non-proliferation is definitely the path to go down when concerning nuclear weapons. Kind of disarmament, kind of cutting back on that supply instead of stockpiling, cutting down on building. Of course, I feel like there also needs to be a balance of who has nuclear weapons at which point. You can't have one country completely get rid of their nuclear arsenal, have the others still hanging on to it because then there's no threat of retaliation if that country decides to use their nuclear arsenal. So it definitely needs to be a meeting of the countries, maybe at the UN or something, to kind of discuss those disarmament policies and have very strict, different kind of punishments in place if countries don't follow those lines, if they hang on to their nuclear weapons or if it's discovered they're still developing them, stuff like that. So I think non-proliferation would definitely be the way to kind of approach the threat of nuclear terror and nuclear weapons in the world, but it needs to be from a strict standpoint. It needs to be kind of more so leaning towards everyone needs to do this. There's no kind of consent. There's no what's it called? There's no concessions given for any
Yeah,
countries that break that rule.
yeah. That actually kind of goes directly into the next question. How do you feel about some countries having nuclear weapons while others don't or don't have the capability of making them?
So I feel like it does give the countries with nuclear weapons a bit of an unfair advantage when kind of discussing in certain political atmospheres. The U.S. I'm not the U.S. isn't only large because of their nuclear arsenal, but definitely having that and Russia having theirs gives them a little more sway in global politics, especially when we're talking about potential war situations. A country isn't going to haphazardly attack another country with a giant nuclear arsenal if they have none. So I feel like as long as leaders in the world, countries that are kind of at the forefront of modern technology and democracy, have those nuclear weapons, I feel like it's decent to act as a discouragement to start the beginning of wars because if a war began, the country without nuclear weapons would know that bad things were going to happen to them. But at the same time, I feel like we shouldn't really be thinking only in a context of war at all times. So in those times when there is peace, I don't think it's fair that some countries should be able to pull the nuclear weapons card in order to get more sway in the political environment. Um, Now, I'm definitely not saying, but as I was saying before, I don't think we should be moving towards all countries getting their own nuclear arsenal. I believe we should be moving towards all countries not having one in the first place, kind of cutting down on that non-proliferation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
No problem. You have a nice day.
You too.